Princess! Celestia bolted up, panting, though she soon regretted moving so suddenly. Her head throbbed with a sharp stabbing pain. Her ears rang. Her vision was rimmed with stars. Her nose was filling with a smell of vomit that had come up from her throat. It was an assault on her senses, and Celestia could only lay back down and lift a hoof to her throbbing head. What happened? Celestia asked as she cranked her eyes open again. She could see that she was lying on a worn tarp, with another covering her as a blanket. Her head was resting on a pile of guard-issue sandbags. She was also still in the rotunda, her light sphere spell having floated to the ceiling like a balloon, illuminating the space. She wasn't alone either. Twinblades, Pathfinder, and Nightgaze had been laying nearby, but the trio had stood up and moved towards her. Fortress went nuts and clubbed you in the head with a lamp, Pathfinder said, holding up a lamp that had a large dent in the side. She got you good, too. Where is she now? She ran off into the tunnels. But don't think about that right now, Twinblade said before she went to Celestia's side. She gently moved Celestia's hoof away and brushed back some of the princess's mane, revealing the lump on the side of her head. Okay, now that you're awake, I think it's safe to move. We need to get you topside into a medic. You have to have a concussion after that. You really think she has a concussion? I mean, shouldn't she be loopy and seeing stars and... It's not that bad of a concussion, Twinblade said as she let Celestia's mane fall back into place. It's minor, but that doesn't mean she won't have the symptoms. Princess, do you think you can stand? Celestia shifted, wincing as the movement made her throbbing in her head worsen. Still, with the 3 soldiers watching, ready to catch her if she were to stumble, Celestia struggled to her hooves. She was shaky for a moment, as if she were a foal that hadn't yet learned to walk. Yet, with her body upright now, her headache slowly began to fade in a dull discomfort as the ringing in her ears and stars in her vision disappeared. I think I'm doing better now that I'm upright again, Celestia said, taking a gingerly step forward and noticing the feel of the stone beneath her hoof. She looked down and saw that her shoes were missing. Her chest piece and crown were gone as well. Where are... They're right here, Princess, Nightgaze assured, showing her that the royal vestments were stored securely in a saddlebag. We thought you might be more comfortable without them. Would you like them back? No. I don't want to bother with them right now. Just please, keep them safe. Nightgaze nodded, securing the flap to his saddlebags. At the same time, Twinblades moved in front of the squad. Stepping beneath the archway she had marked for the first time they had arrived at the rotunda with all the other guards. And it's time to retreat. We need to get you back to the surface, and then we can... No, we can't leave yet, Celestia said. We need to go back to the crypt. Why would we go back to the crypt when that's the exact opposite direction of the stairs that lead outside? Twinblades asked firmly. I know, Lieutenant. But I think I had a vision. Celestia took a few steps to the side, finding her balance as she recalled what she had seen. In my dream, I saw twisted clocks before I was chased by a wall of darkness. I saw a purple star and heard Twilight calling to me. She led me to the coffin chamber, which is at the far end of the crypt. I then heard a muffled shouting and thumping before I was grabbed, lifted off the ground, and crushed. I believe it was a message from Twilight, as she's trying to tell us that she's in the crypt. Celestia turned to look back at the squad, and found concerned eyes looking back at her. Her temper flared, and she stomped a hoof. It is what I saw! We don't doubt you, Princess. You did take a blow to the head, and you're sounding a little off your rocker, Pathfinder said, only for Nightgaze to lift a hoof and smack him on the back of the head. I mean, disoriented. Yes, that's it. He paused, rubbing the back of his head. That's what I meant. Celestia furrowed her eyebrows. I am not. She winced and staggered back, her headache coming back full force. Going anywhere but outside. You're hurt, Twinblade said firmly as she stepped up to the princess. I promise, I'll lead a dozen soldiers straight to the crypt if you believe that's where Twilight is. Right now, however, your safety is our priority. You need to see a doctor. But Lieutenant, Princess, do you remember the promise you made to me when we arrived? You agreed that you would follow my orders. My orders are that we're retreating. We're getting you topside, getting you a doctor, and then we'll come back and storm the place with as many troops as we can. We'll find Princess Luna, we'll find Twilight, and we'll pin down whatever it was that was attacking us. Now, form up, grab anything that's left of our supplies, and get ready to move out. Nightgaze and Pathfinder saluted quickly before gathering up the supplies. Celestia did not snap to orders so willingly. She glared Twinblades down for a moment. The lieutenant just glared back at her, showing no fear in the face of the princess. Finally, Celestia conceded. With a deep frown, she nodded her head, turned and went to try and retether her light sphere spell, which was floating in the ceiling. At the same time, Celestia saw the lieutenant join in the search for the room. She, however, did not work beside Pathfinder and Nightgaze, who were packing up anything she could see of use. No, Twinblades was searching for something. A something she found. She slipped her wing beneath her saddlebag, and removed an item from beneath it. Yet, before Celestia could see what it was, Twinblades had tucked it beneath her saddlebags. How are you holding up, Princess? I'm fine, Celestia replied coldly as the squad continued towards the exit. They had left the rotunda behind, as well as her light sphere spell. The blow to the head she had suffered and the resulting headache was making magic near impossible. A basic light level spell made her head throb like it was being pounded by a hammer. An immediate tethering spell, which would have let her pull the light sphere along like a balloon on a string, was beyond her capacity at the moment. Still, the squad had enough light to see. The light gems in the soldiers' armors and Pathfinder's horn illuminated the tunnels ahead and behind as Twinblades guided them back to the entrance. And they had to be going the right way. The air was getting less stale. The smell of the Everfree forest began to waft in the air. The entrance was close. This, however, did not bring relief to Celestia's thoughts or her headache. She could only think of the crypt in Twilight. Her dream. She did not believe it was the result of a concussion. At the same time, she was a mare of her word. She had promised she would follow the lieutenant's orders. She also didn't like to admit it, but she did need to see a doctor. If she was to raise the sun in the morning, which could only be a few hours away, she would likely need a double dose of something prescription strength. Here are the stairs, Twinblade said as they made a turn and began to ascend the ancient stone steps, everybody else following a few steps behind. I hope Shining Armor has a good excuse about why he hasn't sent the reinforcements yet. I don't care what his excuse is, Pathfinder said. I'm just glad we're leaving the nut house behind. I mean, no offense, Princess, but I wouldn't want to live here. This castle was a far more warm and welcoming 1,000 years ago, Sergeant, Celestia said firmly. It was a beacon, much like Canterlot. The greatest minds and finest artists, the most talented crafts ponies, they all called this castle and surrounding town their home, once upon a time. And there was never a reason to fear the dark. All were able to test their heads at night in peace, knowing my sister kept watch over them, like the moon in the sky. The evening was as welcoming as a soft bed and warm blanket after a long day, perhaps too welcoming. So many ponies found rest at night, so few stayed up. It all led to trouble. So then why did you abandon the castle? It wasn't one thing. The ponies in the castle, town, all left, ruining the local economy. The stallions and mares of the royal court were jumping at shadows, fearing that Nightmare Moon hadn't been defeated, but was just waiting for an opportunity to strike. And that, the halls above held so many memories. I couldn't walk 10 steps without thinking of Luna and what I had done. Sergeant, maybe this isn't the best time to be talking to the princess about this, Twinblade said, glancing over her shoulder as the squad continued to ascend the stairs. Sorry, Pathfinder apologized quickly. You know me, I just like to kill time. It's quite all. Celestia came to a stop, looking up at the staircase. The path forward disappeared into shadow, and, like in the archives, Celestia felt a sudden urge to step into the darkness. She knew enough this time to resist the silent siren call. It's time you shouldn't need to kill. Lieutenant, the staircase was not this long when we came in. In a brief few moments, the feeling in the air changed, like a pony who had removed a mask to reveal a disfigured facial feature. The staircase suddenly lost all feeling of freedom. The smell of the forest outside faded, succumbing to the dry, stale smell that choked so many of the tunnel. The echoes from their hoofsteps and breathing became distant, as if the staircase stretched on for miles ahead of them. "More sapples," Pathfinder whispered as he turned around and focused the light from his horn down the corridor behind them. "Lieutenant? I think I heard something." "Don't lose your head, Pathfinder," Twinblade said firmly before looking back at Celestia. "Princess, I know you're in no state to do it, but we need light, and a lot of it." Celestia nodded. They had faced this effect before, in the archives, and the light had been the solution. Light had driven away the darkness and revealed the room for what it truly was. The door could not be more than a few dozen steps ahead of them. They just needed enough light to pierce the darkness. "Okay," the princess said as she spread her hooves, widening her base. "I'll try to conjure as much light as I can, but I won't be able to pull open the door at the same time, though." "Understood," Twinblade said firmly, before jumping up and hovering in the air. "Nightgaze, watch our flanks. Pathfinder, get up here with me. The moment we can see the door, we need to get it open." Pathfinder quickly galloped to the steps to join Twinblade's, nodding his head even though it was a noticeable tremor in his breathing. The lieutenant returned that nod, then looked back at Celestia. It was all the cue the princess needed. Furrowing her brow and cringing through her quickly worsening headache, Celestia conjured her light spell. The radiance from her horn sparkled and grew, stretching out and pushing back the darkness. Brighter and brighter she made her horn, the worse the headache became. "We can see the door!" Twinblade shouted. "Hurry!" Celestia grunted out. Her eyes squeezed shut, and her ears flattened against the back of her head. Beads of sweat began to run down her face. It hurt so much. It was like her head was going to split open, like her brain was boiling, like some pony was trying to cut off her horn with a rusty saw. "The door won't open, Lieutenant!" Pathfinder shouted, his panicked words accompanied with the rattle of the door's hinges. "Then we break it down! I want a breaching spell right on the seam!" Celestia slumped, kneeling down. She was about to collapse. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was pounding, and each beat sent another sledgehammer strike of pain to her skull. A metallic taste formed in her mouth, and the small cut that accompanied the lump on her head reopened, sending a trickle of blood down the side of her face. "Okay, breach spell ready," Pathfinder announced as he and Twinblade stepped back from the door. "Breach. In 5, 4. Celestia swayed. She was blacking out. The pain was too much. She couldn't keep it up. 3, 2. The light from her horn flickered. Celestia took a deep breath, trying to push through the pain, but she was on a downward spiral. She was stalled. She could not push any more magic into the spell, and it was burning itself out. Her light started to fade. The door grew darker. 1. Breach! Celestia's spell faded for a moment before the breaching charge went off. It went off with a thud, the spell designed to produce no light, and the quartet heard the sound of the doors slamming open. They, however, were not greeted with the pleasant moonlight or the fires of the guards who were still searching the castle's exterior. They did not see shining armor. They didn't see the old castle. All that lay beyond the doors was another tunnel, and more darkness. No. This is the way out," Pathfinder stuttered. He galloped forward into the doorway, stepping through and looking down the dark corridor before them. I know this is the way out. The lieutenant marked the right archway with a rotunda. We made 2 lefts, a right, then another left. This is the right staircase. The right doors. This is the way out. We made a right, a left, and 2 rights to get here. That means we need to make 2 lefts, a right, and another to get out. This is the right staircase. This is supposed to be the exit. Get a hold of yourself, Pathfinder. Twinblade shouted as she landed next to him. "Shove it, Lieutenant," Pathfinder snapped, turning and pointing a hoof at her. "Shove your rules, your orders, and all your decorum right where the sun doesn't shine. Just say it. We're dead. We are all dead. We're going to wander around in the dark until some of us starve to death. Then those who are still alive will do what Fortress did. They'll eat the pony who died and then go back to starving to death until only one of us is left, and then, you know what? That pony will starve to death and be food for the rats. We'll all be dead." Twinblade's buck came swift and without warning. She spun, aimed for the chest, and bucked out her hind legs with all the strength she had earned from years of experience in the guard. Pathfinder was sent sprawling, sliding across the floor and crashing to the wall. His helmet fell off his head, clattering a few feet away. Twinblades, however, didn't even give Pathfinder a moment to recover. She was on him in an instant. One of her wing blades pressed against his neck. "You say we're dead? Well then, let me just put us all out of misery. Would you like that? No? Then get a hold of yourself! We are not dead yet. And until we are dead, we're going to keep fighting to get out. Why? Because I want to see the sun again. Because I want to see my friends and family again. Because I don't want to die in some forsaken tunnel in the middle of the Everfree Forest. And do you know what else, Sergeant? Failure is not an option. Why? Because we have Princess Celestia with us. With Luna missing, she's the only mare in the world that can raise the sun. If we don't get out, then no pony outside will see the sunrise. Do you want that? Do you want Equestria to wither and die in the freezing cold of night? No, he choked out, his eyes watching the blade that was still pressed firmly to his neck. Then start acting like a guard and show an ounce of backbone, Twinblade said. She withdrew her wing, letting Pathfinder gasp and cough as he lifted a hoof to his neck. The lieutenant hadn't drawn blood, but she had been close. Celestia and Nightgaze came up slowly behind the pair. Celestia shaking a little on her hooves, but doing better now that she wasn't trying to cast a spell. "What now, Lieutenant?" Nightgaze asked. "I want to say we just start blasting a hole in the ceiling till we hit the surface. But considering how things are going tonight, I'm not even sure that would work," Twinblades answered as she closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead. "Just give me a minute to think." "There's nothing to think about, Lieutenant," Celestia said with authority, even though her voice was still weak. "If we cannot escape, then we must continue the mission. We look for Twilight and my sister, and right now, my vision is the best lead." Twinblades grit her teeth, finally silently protesting the idea to go stumbling around in the dark because of a dream had by a concussed, rattled mare. Still, after fuming and fidgeting her wings in irritation, she spat a curse, turned on her hooves, and began walking back down the stairs. "Form up. We're going to the crypt." The descent back down the steps was like the descent into Tartarus itself. The air was cold, chilling. Each exhale of their lungs produced hot puffs of steam that curled as they rose to the ceiling. The sensation of being watched crawled on their skin, as if 100 eyes were watching them. The light from the gems in their armor and Pathfinder's horn, which had once seemed a firm shield against the darkness, now felt insufficient. To them, the darkness around them was merely biding its time and could strike out at its leisure. Yet nothing happened. They trekked through the corridors without incident. They were able to return to the rotunda and continue beyond, retracing the path Celestia and Twinblades had taken earlier to reach the crypt. Their path was predictable, and never did it stretch on infinitely without explanation. "Why hasn't anything happened?" Pathfinder asked, standing close to Celestia's right side. "The thing that hunts for us was content to let Fortress starve and slip into insanity," Celestia said. "For all we know, it may enjoy watching us struggle and stumble through the dark." Pathfinder shivered and moved in closer to Celestia. Nightgaze and Twinblades seemed to close ranks as well. They would not admit it, but Celestia had seen this very behavior in her students time and time again. They were afraid and were clinging to her, consciously or subconsciously hoping for protection. So many in Equestria saw her as an unconquerable beacon. She was synonymous with the sun, reliable and constant. It pained her that she could not protect them as she usually would, but without her magic, she was little more than an oversized Pegasus with a forehead deformity. So, Pathfinder said, trying to hide the tremors in his voice. If the thing isn't attacking us, should we even bother going to the crypt? It wouldn't want us to find Twilight Sparkle, would it? It is one of many possible explanations, Celestia confirmed, as the group rounded a corner, continuing on through the dark. If the beast in the shadows feared Twilight, or the knowledge she possessed, it would not want to find us at all. At the same time, if Twilight has found a way to protect herself, the thing that hunts us may be allowing us to reach her. It may be using us to draw her out of her hiding place. Or, Celestia continued, her voice growing low, there's nothing Twilight has or knows that can help us. That all our efforts are and will be for naught. Geez, Princess, couldn't you sugarcoat it a little? Celestia sighed and looked down at Pathfinder. I do apologize, my little pony, but we must respect the danger we face. I am without my magic. We are without reinforcements, and we face an unknown enemy. We cannot lower our guard nor pretend it isn't there. She looked forward again, her tone growing solemn. We face an enemy that defies the laws of reality, and from my experience with Discord, we must be prepared for any possibility. The creature may want us to reach Twilight, or may see us as no threat. Or, the door to the crypt loomed out of the darkness. It was still standing open, like she and Twinblades had left it. Celestia stepped past the edge of the doorway and looked through it. An icy cold wind blew out from the crypt's depths, and the squad's lights seemed to barely be capable of piercing the darkness that clung to the heavy curtains. Or perhaps it was set as a trap, like a spider with its web, and is merely waiting for us to step into its parlor. Anyone vote for trying to find the exit again? Pathfinder asked, glancing hopefully at the rest of his squad. No pony raised their hooves. Instead, Twinblades was the first to step into the crypt. She moved gingerly, and once a few steps inside, she motioned with a wing for the others to follow. Nightgaze moved in behind the lieutenant. Celestia followed behind him, and Pathfinder hurried to take up the rear, not wishing to be left behind. They moved into the darkness, which was like soupy mist. It seemed to cling around them, hanging in the air itself. Their lights could not dispatch these shadows. The cold worsened, becoming the freezing cold of a deep winter. Their armor threatened to freeze to their coats, and shivers crawled up and down their spines. Any chance your magic is working again, Princess? Twinblades asked, despite the fact that her teeth wanted to chatter. No, I have already tried to light my horn, she replied. Nightgaze? Pathfinder questioned. I can hardly see the nose in front of my face. Pathfinder? I can see something. Or the lack of something. Twinblades brought the group to a stop and looked over her shoulder. Sergeant! I'm in new mode. No mood for these riddles. Pathfinder shakily lifted up a hoof, pointing to the groups ahead. Aren't those holes supposed to have skeletons in them? Twinblades and Nightgaze turned, the light from their helmets shining on one of the nearest walls, where they should have seen skeletons of a pony long past, resting in peace. The holes in the wall, however, were all empty. All of them within reach of their lights were empty. Where did they go? Nightgaze asked. A rattling came from behind the group. They all quickly looked back, but saw nothing in the darkness. Another rattle, this one from in front of them. They looked forward, but saw nothing. A third rattle, this time from directly above them. They turned their lights upwards, illuminating the ceiling through the curls of inky black mist. There they saw pale white bones. Skeletons clung to the ceiling, their skulls turned backwards and staring down at the group in silent shrieks. A skeleton then moved. Its jaw snapped shut. More rattling came from all around, the clicking of bone against bone, joints grinding without the cartilage that had once buffered their movement. Twinblade spread her wings, and thus her swords. Nightgaze and Pathfinder clung close to the princess. And Celestia screamed as a skeleton from the ceiling dropped down onto her head and wrapped its bony limbs around her. That scream signaled the horde. Skeletons rushed from the darkness in front and behind the group, rattling like the chains of Tartarus themselves. They moved against the squad, reaching and attempting to overwhelm them by sheer numbers alone. Twinblade struck out with her swords, striking at the skeletons and attempting to keep them back. Nightgaze and Pathfinder bucked, shattering bone with their guard-trained hooves. Celestia, however, continued to flail and panic, trying to remove the skeleton that clung to her head as it was now biting into her neck. "Get off! Get off! Get off!" At once, the crypt rang with Celestia's royal Canterlot voice, a booming sound that not only demanded attention, but carried the force of a hurricane. The skeleton on Celestia's head fell apart at its joints from the blow, and, as did the series directly in front of the princess. It was a turn of luck, something Celestia needed a moment to comprehend, to believe that it actually had happened. And when she realized the weapon she possessed in her vocal cords, she acted quickly. She craned her neck out to Twinblade's, grabbed the lieutenant by the tail, and pulled her away from the skeletons she fiercely fought. A gentle toss, and Twinblades landed on Celestia's back, slightly bewildered. "Princess? Just get the sergeants on and keep the dead ahead of me," Celestia said before turning forward. She bent her head, sucked in a deep breath, and then, with the full force of the Canterlot royal voice, she shouted, "Begone!" A dozen of the skeletons crumbled at the force of the voice, and those further back stumbled. Celestia dared to let herself smile. She glanced back, seeing the two sergeants were riding on her back as well. It was an odd situation, to say the least. No pony had rode on her back in centuries. Still, their weight was minimal, and, after rearing back and drawing in another deep breath, Celestia barreled forward with every step. "You shall not have us, you filthy abominations!" The skeletons fell before her like dominoes, and soon Celestia burst through the horde and was able to gallop freely down the corridor. Pathfinder and Nightgaze cheered, swinging their hooves in the air while Twinblade smiled and gave Celestia an approving nod. An unearthly roar came from behind them, and soon the rattling symphony of bones became deafening. Pathfinder focused the light from his horn back, and saw a wall of skeletons screaming at him. The horde that had assaulted them had now become one dreadful beast, a skeletal swarm with a head composed of hundreds of skulls and chattering jaws. It rocked and struck against the wall of the crypts, sending shocks through the floor and threatening to tip Celestia and send her crashing to the floor. "Must go faster! Must go faster!" Pathfinder shouted, unable to take his light or his gaze off the horror that chased them. And Celestia tried to run faster. She tried to spring with all the speed her legs could provide. She skidded around corners, using her wings to keep her upright. Though the rattle of bones and panicked shouts of the squad, she could hear her heart pounding in her ears, and could feel it pounding in her head. Her headache was becoming unbearable again. She began to waver. She was not a race pony. She had not run this far nor hard in decades, and the pain. Her head once more felt like it was going to split open. Her vision began to tunnel, growing narrow as darkness overcame her eyes. She was going to pass out. She had to slow down, but if she slowed down, they would be crushed, if not torn apart, by the skeletal worm. Her vision narrowed further, and as it did, she noticed a star in her vision. It was not stars. It was not plural. There was a single glow in the periphery of her gaze, a glow that was glowing stronger, a glow that was purple. A flicker of hope filled her chest. They were close. She knew it. They just needed a little more time. Breathing harder, trying to pull oxygen back into her lungs, Celestia pushed through her headache and focused on the path ahead. There was a bend coming up, a right turn. She pushed down, quickening her gallop. Then she jumped, spreading her wings as much as she could in the narrow corridor. She glided into the corner of the crypt, taking deep breaths. She then landed, skidded, and turned to face the skeletal worm, and once more unleashed the royal Canterlot voice. "No!" It was a single punch of a shout, which struck the beast and caused the bones in front of it to crack and collapse in on one another. That led to a chain reaction, the worm falling apart as it changed into an avalanche of bone and marrow. It loomed, threatening to crush Celestia and the squad, but she broke into a sprint again, continuing to race down the crypt's tunnels. "There!" Celestia shouted, focusing ahead. Her vision was almost totally dark. She would pass out within moments, but she could see it, the purple star. It was right before her. "The coffin chamber is just ahead!" Twinblades looked around Celestia's neck, seeing not the chamber but a closed door at the end of the corridor they were racing down. She looked behind. She saw the coming avalanche of bone, then shouted over the chattering of the bone. "Pathfinder! Open that door!" "Yes, sir!" he snapped, turning around on Celestia's back and leaning to one side. He focused the magic of his horn onto the door, and the great metal barricade began to yield. It creaked and groaned as it opened, and the growling and chattering of bone avalanche seemed to only grow louder, angered by its prey about to escape. Inch by inch, the door opened, and step by step, Celestia drew closer. It would be tight, but the door should be wide enough. Celestia began to favor the right side of the hallway, so she could duck in through the opening quickly. The distance was closing. They were getting close. "That's enough!" Twinblade shouted. "We're ready to close it the moment we're... Ah! Get it off!" Twinblade spun her head around, seeing Pathfinder flailing his forelegs. A skeleton had reformed from the looming avalanche of bone and had thrown itself onto Celestia's back. It was now attacking Pathfinder, scraping at his face with its hooves and struggling to bite him. Twinblades looked back at the looming door, which was the best a few seconds away. Panic entered her voice. "Nightgaze, help Pathfinder! We have to close that door the moment we get inside, or those skeletons will flood the coffin chamber." "Understood, Lieutenant," Nightgaze shouted, drawing himself up on Celestia's back. He turned around, seeing the rolling tsunami of bones coming towards them as the skeleton Pathfinder was fighting with. Nightgaze tried to reach out a hoof, tried to buck the beast off, but Pathfinder's panicking flailing was making it impossible for Nightgaze to land a blow. "Hurry! The door's coming too fast!" "Yes, sir!" Nightgaze shouted before taking a deep breath. He then leapt, with forehooves extended and a battle cry booming in his throat. Nightgaze jumped over Pathfinder's head and tackled the attacking skeleton. He and the skeleton flew off Celestia's back, falling into and becoming consumed by the avalanche of bone. "Nightgaze!" Pathfinder shouted, the moment he realized who had saved him and how. "Pathfinder!" Twinblade's shout came the moment Celestia had ducked through the door. The trio raced into the coffin chamber, and working off instinct and his own fear, Pathfinder responded to his lieutenant's shout. He called on his magic, slamming the door shut, and the bone avalanche crashed against it a moment later. The sudden impact made the whole crypt shake, and Celestia, who had been trying to skid to a stop, tripped over her own hooves. She and the sergeants fell forward, the moment of her sprint throwing them into the air. They rolled, they bounced, and they fell into a heap at the far end of the coffin chamber.